Welcome to the House of Phantoms. I am your host, the Phantom Stranger. Tonight's episode, Wrath of the Spectre. Our tale opens on a remote road in the dead of night. Two thieves, Fritz and Pete, launch fire grenades at an armored car. The grenades penetrate the bullet-resistant glass, forcing the guards to evacuate. Fritz then guns down the guards in cold blood. When Pete points out how pointless the murders were, Fritz justifies his actions by comparing the guards to police. However, Fritz calls for retreat once the actual police blast their way onto the scene. The police wound Pete's leg, slowing his escape. Fritz decides to abandon Pete and murders him to ensure he won't snitch. Later that night, Detective Jim Corrigan is called to the scene. While examining Pete's corpse, Corrigan finds a business card for an antique shop. It is likely Fritz gave the card to Pete in order to provide contact information. Meanwhile, at that same antique shop, Fritz justifies Pete's murder by saying the money can now be cut 3 ways rather than 4. Fritz advises Hank to lay low at his garage and tells Charlie to manage the antique shop as usual. Fritz departs, bragging he will hide out in South America until his money runs out. So, let us dwell on our main villain for a moment, shall we? Fritz is openly treacherous yet expects total loyalty. Strangely, his minions give it. It is likely Fritz recruits only the weakest of wills for his needs. Secondly, Fritz is reckless and masks it with flimsy excuses. The same night, Corrigan enters the antique shop, alone. He bluntly demands that Charlie snitch on his accomplices. Charlie feigns ignorance as he goes for the gun under the counter. We'll be back after these messages.
Wrath of the Spectre is sponsored by the following: Hostess Fruit Buys. You would have to be crazy not to enjoy one. And Migos, world's greatest superheroes. Each sold separately. By Mago.
Charlie fires upon Corrigan, boasting the detective will never know his accomplices. However, the bullets pass right through the misty form of Corrigan. Here, we discover the detective was not being careless coming alone, but rather carefree. Corrigan is a ghost, a spectre, the wrath of Abraham's God itself. Charlie flees with the Spectre in haunting pursuit. Charlie drives for hours until phoning Hank, who laughs off claims of a haunting spook. Racing like a bat from hell, Charlie is blinded by the very sight of the Spectre. Blinded to the fact he's driving off a cliff. The next day, Hank succumbs to the chill of reading how Charlie drove himself off that cliff. Hank's reading is interrupted by the Spectre. Realizing he can't kill what is already dead, Hank asks what does the Spectre want? The wrathful wraith voices his want of eternal rest. However, such a rest is impossible so long as men like Hank exist. The Spectre then melts Hank's rifle right before melting Hank's very body. Curiously, the Spectre somehow deduces who and where Fritz is at that moment. On a flight to somewhere in South America, Fritz continues to gloat over the heist. Here, Fritz reckons his destination has no extradition treaty with the United States. I don't know about the 1970s, but today, I think all South American countries do. The Spectre then emerges like a vengeful genie from the smoke of Fritz's pipe. Spectre declares as long as the murderer remains free, the souls of his victims must writhe in torment. The invisible Avenger commands Fritz to stare into his eyes as they walk together into the Valley of Death. And that, they do. The Spectre's Bronze Age history is rather convoluted. He was an Earth 2 denizen whose unexplained sightings on Earth 1 failed to fit canon. These sightings began in The Brave and the Bold, wherein he made appearances separate from his own Earth 2 title. Although Spectre possessed the power to traverse worlds, No explicit mention was stated in The Brave and the Bold. However, editor Joe Orlando stated the Spectre from Adventure Comics in The Brave and the Bold involved the Spectre from Earth-1. This would seemingly fit canon since the Earth-2 Spectre perished in Justice League of America number 83. However, the character appears again in America vs. the Justice Society, where is said to journey between Earth-1 and Earth-2. Also, in that same story, Dr. Fate states the Spectre has been without a human host. Since when? Hadn't the ghostly Guardian had been possessing the Jim Corrigan of Earth-1? To add additional complication, Earth-1 contained a second Jim Corrigan who was an African-American from the Jimmy Olsen title. Since the unexplained appearances on Earth-1 took place in The Brave and the Bold, readers simply refer to these tales as Earth-B. I have been your host, the Phantom Stranger, and please visit me again here in the House of Phantoms, where the horror is.